Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to get those elusive abdominals, that six pack. The abs are one of the most desired muscle groups to have apparent on our physique. Also, coming from just a general aesthetic perspective, they look really, really good. Also, as a competitor, a physique competitor, abs are essential, especially if you're a men's physique competitor. But even as a bodybuilder, there's something that really brings about the whole package. And talking as someone who has not got the best abs, but has been able to bring them from pretty damn shitty to pretty damn okay, and have also done this process with many of my clients who have developed their abs much better than they otherwise would have been on their own. I'm going to be sharing some of my lessons and thoughts and takeaways of how you can apply all of that to yourself. Lesson number one. Let's talk about this one quickly. Abs are not made in the kitchen. Why they're not made in the kitchen? Because actually you'd be better spending less time in the kitchen eating and being in a calorie deficit, because abs become most visible when you can pull away that layer of body fat that is covering them. If you have a huge amount of body fat covering your abdominals, they're just not going to be as apparent. We need to peel that layer away. It's like unwrapping a present. You don't know what's in the damn wrapping until you unwrap it and then you get the goods, right? So let's clear that one up. Abs are not made in the kitchen. Lesson number two then is that low body fat is not enough. I have an image here of me 10 years ago, very, very lean, near maybe 5% body fat, certainly under 10% body fat, where the abs should be very prominent, but they're just not. I have non-thick abs, they're shallow, and they're not very present and apparent. And so quite clearly, being at a low body fat percentage for some people is just not enough unless they've got the thick, prominent abs underneath. So we're coming to the next lesson. Lesson number three is that your abs cannot be an afterthought if you actually want them to grow. Because many people treat them like an afterthought. You do your leg day, and at the end of legs, you throw in a few crunches or something, and you kind of just go through the motions. You're like, that will do. You don't really give it the same due diligence as your squat, where maybe you're logbooking it and looking to beat the reps or the load week after week. You're really careful about your technique, give it plenty of volume. So they can't be an afterthought. And also, unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, compound lifts are not going to be big enough. Aren't going to be enough to grow them. I say compound lifts are big, right? But do we really get much of a stretch, which seems to be pretty important for hypertrophy through the abs? No, we just get an isometric, and isometrics, quite clearly through the literature, aren't the best way to grow muscle groups. So it's very unlikely your compound lifts are going to be enough to be able to grow your abs. It's even worse than say, hey, if you have weak biceps, your pulling motions aren't going to be enough to maximize bicep growth. Well, that's very true, but you're still going to grow pretty decent biceps through pulling motions. Many of us will, because the bicep is lengthening and shortening. It's getting involved. But the abs are literally under an isometric contraction. There is not much going on there, and so you're not going to grow thick, prominent abs through compound basic lifts. So you want to approach them like any other muscle. You want to dedicate some isolation work to them. You want to make sure to train them through a nice stretch. So not just planks and stuff like this. You want to get them through a nice kind of arching up, getting a nice stretch through your abdominals there. And you want to be training them hard and with a decent whack of volume as well. You can't just expect them to grow from a set. You can't just expect them to grow from like 10 RER training where you're just going through the motions. You have to really give them dedication. So yeah, like I said, most people just treat them like an afterthought and do generic things like side bends and some like planks and body weight crunches, which are just way too underloading and could be considered junk volume at some point. So if you really want thick abs, you want to train their abs through abdominal flexion. So what do the abs do? They kind of flex the spine. And when do we get the most stretched? It's when our spine is actually extended. A lot of people, unfortunately, when they train for abs, they're actually training other muscle groups. They get their hip flexors really involved because they just kind of move through this sort of motion. Whereas you're going to see some exercises here that I'm doing, and you'll quite clearly see me make this very purposeful movement of my back, where I'm looking to take origin away from insertion. So thinking kind of your pelvis away from your lower chest, where the origin and insertion are, to stretch the muscle. So arching up and then rounding over versus just kind of moving at my hips. The hips should be somewhat silent. They shouldn't move too much. If you're moving a lot of the hips, then you're going to find that the hip flexors are just taking over that movement. Or maybe you're moving even too far. You're trying to get the muscle even shorter, but the abs range of motion is actually not that much. So you might find you want to cut that a little bit, especially given the literature showing that kind of the stretched position for muscles, loading that is seen to be the most important. So it's really important to make sure you get that nice stretch for your abs. So exercises that I personally like that are very readily available in many gyms: machine crunches. If you've got a good one, they can be really great. Failing a good machine crunch, you can use a cable crunch, very easy to do and get access to. Ab rollouts are pretty damn decent. You can really get a good stretch on that movement. Then things like decline crunches, they can put you in a great position, especially if you can get like an ab mat and put it under your lower back. That can allow you to get into an even more stretched position. Or if you've got the strength for it, unsupported crunches. So you can do this on like the edge of a back extension or off a Roman chair, where you essentially put your hips, you basically, as if you're going to do a back extension, but you flip up, face away from the machine, and then you actually round down and crunch up for the back. Those are some of my favorite movements for trying to train ab flexion and really develop your abs. So like I said, lesson number 3, you got to train them like any other muscle group. They cannot be an afterthought. Compound lifts are not enough to get thick abs. Lesson number 4 is something that people aren't going to like, but it's unarguable. It's unarguable for every muscle, but particularly the abs, and that abs are particularly determined by genetics. In that, we can thicken abs, we can grow them, we can make them more prominent, but we cannot, like when we're born, we have our muscle divisions and where they insert and all these sort of kind of aspects. This is not just me trying to cope as someone with poor abs. Like truly, I wish this wasn't true, but I was born with a large gap between my abs. They were not symmetrical. It doesn't matter how much I train them, I'm not going to be able to change that. Whereas you have someone, and I'll get some images up here of examples of people with maybe very good ab genetics versus maybe lesser good ab genetics to give some extra credence to this argument. So first of all, the greatest of all time, Ronnie Coleman, doesn't have amazing abs. I mean, they're pretty thick, but they're not beautiful in terms of how they look here, right? He's got a little bit of a gap between them here as well. There are people who have better abdominals than, again, the greatest of all time, Ronnie Coleman, arguably. Like, look at them here. It's just not a beautiful six-pack right there. Whereas you look at Sean Roden, RIP, amazing abdominals, arguably some of the best out there, just unbelievable aesthetics, really, really nice. This is not the fault of Ronnie. Like, look how thick and well developed his abs are. Like, they're just beautiful. And like here, who's more genetically gifted, Ronnie or Flex? Like, Flex's abs here are, again, beautiful, very thick, little gap here, very symmetrical, versus like, again, yeah, symmetrical here, but they're just not the best looking abs. So it just kind of gives some credence to that. You can just see how varied people's abs are too. Like, look at Jay's abs here, not particularly great, but even worse than Ronnie's, you would argue, in this shot right here. Not a great pair of abs. And again, it just comes down to the variability between athletes. Now, someone who has some of the best abs in the world, like Mr. Olympia men's physique, right? Ryan Terry. Look at these abs. Like, very thick, pretty damn symmetrical. Like, his obliques are very good as well, but we're really talking about the abdominis here. Like, very, very good abs. We have some other examples as well. Matt Ogus would be known for his very good aesthetic abs. Like, you can see them just here. I don't think I have any like specific, well, there you go, like beautiful abs. Like, look at these. These are some of the most pristine abdominals out there. I've seen videos, he does train them absolutely directly. He's made them thicker, but he's got this great symmetry across here. Like, look at those. This isn't a 6-pack, right? This is an 8-pack. And yes, I'm blowing smoke, and Matt is one of my favorite people. But you can't argue with these abs. Like, look at that. All of us wish we had those abs. Everyone does. Like, Ryan Terry wishes he has Matt Ogus's abs right now. So then the final one is Jeff Albert. Amazing bodybuilder. Really, really great dude. And you can even see some differences with some of his athletes here, with their abdominals, the like divisions, and even up to thickness. Even with Eric Helms, like actually very nice abs on Eric right here. But with Jeff, the reason I've chosen him is because he doesn't have the most perfect abs, but that hasn't held him back as a bodybuilder. You can kind of see them in the back here. He's got actually an even wider gap between his abs than I do. And that does kind of not help the aesthetic here, right? They're not the best abs. Like, this isn't the best pose for him to show them, but seriously, like, he's got far better muscle groups than his abs here. And again, I'm not firing shots at Jeff, like, he totally understands. I'm sure he's done his absolute best to make his abs the best they can be, but it's just not going to be a strength of his, unfortunately. Now, the key is remembering, just like anything, because genetics are a real thing, they're the deck of cards you've got, but it's how you play with them, right? So you might not have the best hand, but you can play with that really well. And also, even if you haven't got the best insertions, you can make them thicker, more prominent over time, which is something, like I mentioned right at the start, is what I do with myself and my clients through following the principles that I've outlined here, where they aren't an afterthought. You don't just kind of forget that body fat influences things, but you do train them during your gaining phases, where you're going to be in the best position to grow muscle through exercises that train you through ab flexion, that get you a big stretch, and you train them with plenty of intensity, plenty of volume. I went through periods of training them not quite daily, but certainly frequencies of 4-5 times a week, with plenty of sets, 4-5 sets, taking them very close to failure. Wrapping up, to show off your abs best, you do need to be at a low enough body fat, but for thicker, more prominent abs, you need to grow them, and you need to grow them just like you do any other muscle. Being lean isn't enough. You need to have enough of that muscle to show it off properly. And if you focus on growing them and getting lean, you will find you have thicker, more aesthetic abs. And hopefully this has helped. So guys, if you are interested in developing muscle and growing and stuff like this, coaching is what we do at Revive Stronger. That's how we make our living. We help people get more aesthetic physiques, grow muscles. We know the science, the practice, how to optimize results. And if that is something you're interested in, you want a hand, you can always apply for our coaching. It's linked in the bio/description as always. And you can get a consultation with one of us and we can talk through your goals and how we can help. But otherwise, hope you've enjoyed this, guys. And I guess I'll catch you in the next one.